you've all been collaborating. You all knew each other going into the pandemic, but you've been talking a lot more and collaborating over the last few months. Talk to me sort of about how you came together, how those conversations got started. Todd, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, we've been in the industry as CEOs for a long time, so we've gotten to know each other inevitably through, investors or social events and so forth. And it's really been good to, the job of a CEO is lonely, and it's great to have people that you can kind of commiserate at times with, people you can celebrate victories with, and in these crisis times, really compare thoughts on what you should be doing next.
How lonely is that job at a time when there is so much uncertainty? We're in not just a health crisis, but an economic crisis and a social crisis. Stewart?
It's pretty lonely. I mean, I guess it always is. And I think it probably has to do a lot with the kind of decisions we're called on to make, because a lot of the job is making decisions. But we've trained up over the course of decades in certain classes of decisions and get pretty comfortable making them. And now we're facing decisions that no one has had to make before. So I think it makes it much harder. And actually, going back to how we got together, we've ended up in more or less like a mutual support group, and not just the three of us, but there's like another dozen plus people that we spend a lot of time with trying to work through a lot of these challenges.
Aaron, you have a remarkable way of finding humor in a very dark time. How do you channel that at a time like this to keep your team motivated, your customers motivated?
I do want to clarify that I don't find the humor in the darkness, but there's sometimes things that happen that are humorous amidst obviously many very difficult things. So I think what we're doing as leaders right now is dealing with some unbelievable stress in the system of everybody going and working remotely, dealing with a tremendous amount of just disruption to their daily lives, family members that might have health issues, economic issues, in their networks. And now obviously layered on to many social issues of racial injustice that has been persistent in this country for so long, but obviously brought to the foreground in a much more significant way. And so these stresses add up, and I think right now it's an environment where our companies have to lead and run with our principles, and us, I guess, as leaders, we have to make sure that those principles are clear and expressed. And occasionally I might have a tweet that I might regret a few hours later, and I do end up deleting some of those, by the way.
You do? All right, I'm gonna have to track that more closely.
Sometimes I treat Twitter like a mix of a timeless content platform and Snapchat. And so I just need to get something off my chest because the administration is doing something I'm just so frustrated about. And then I go back and I'm like, okay, I'm calm now. Let's be more productive about dealing with this issue. So a little bit of a balance of that.
Well, on a more serious note, we're speaking on a day that cases of COVID-19 in California are spiking by the thousands. I mean, your CEO is responsible for leading thousands of people and keeping them safe. What goes through your head when something like that happens, when it almost felt like things were getting better? Todd?
Well, as the CEO of Okta for 11 years now, it's been an important job, but I've never had to make these kind of decisions that really had life and death and health implications for 2,500 employees. So it's something that I take, and I know Aaron and Stewart feel the same way, take it very, very seriously. And it's something that when you really have to put down your priorities as a leader, it's really clarifying. It's like, number one is the health and safety of our employees. And even if in the short term that might adversely impact the business, that's the decision we're going to make. So we've taken a really conservative approach in terms of working remotely, not requiring people to go back to offices, until there's a vaccine or a treatment, and it's a decision that I'm happy with.
So, Aaron and Stewart, is this changing your plans? I mean, knowing that the second wave is real, is this changing your return to the office, whatever that was going to look like?
Our plan was already, let's set a marker several months in the future and revisit then. But employees do want some certainty, so I think it's important to say, we're definitely not going to reopen before X date, so people can plan their lives. I think it's also important to communicate the policies now. And I think one thing I'll try to get through briefly, but I think it's really interesting. We're all friends. We all help each other. We also compete for talent, and not just among ourselves, with Salesforce and Square and Twitter and Facebook. And that's a microcosm, like the tech industry, of the whole economy, because while I don't think of us as competing very frequently with like Goldman Sachs or American Airlines, everyone's hiring more software developers. Software is becoming an increasingly important part of every single business. And even if we wanted to like demand, expect, require that employees come into the office, I don't know, next January or something like that, if Todd's making an offer to that same software engineer, that same marketer, the same person says, hey, you can have flexibility. You can come into the office a couple of days a week and work from home, or you can just work remotely. Like you can move back to Ohio or wherever you're from, be close to family. We're not going to get that person, you know, and people would leave Slack. So there's a lot of game theory around this. And I think the chips are already on the table from a lot of really large companies who have already made their decision. And it's I don't know if it's impossible, but it's going to be very, very hard to walk back. Like if you go down this path and 20% of your employees are remote and 50% have adjusted the way that they work and where they live to work in an environment where they're in the office a day or two a week and at home the rest, unwinding that, it's a little bit hard to imagine. So
on that note, is Jack Dorsey saying employees can work from home forever? Is that a mistake?
Well, I don't know. Maybe it's a domino tipping. I mean, I also think we're making the right choice for us, which is we are going to let people work remotely. We are going to offer flexibility. We still have to work through the ramifications of that. But going back to, what's that?
Indefinitely, they can work remotely?
Yeah, because I don't know that we're going to be able to take it back. You know, if we say you're able to work remotely and you move with your family to a different state, like we can't call you up and say, hey, all right, come back to the Bay Area and buy a house. But the COVID spiking thing, this has just been bewildering to me, because like, what did people expect? Were there people who really thought that this was over? It's been bizarre to watch it and also to watch it become a political phenomenon.
On that note, Aaron, you know, we've seen obviously companies, different parts of the countries taking different approaches to just how serious this virus is. How do you sort of take a stand on the health and safety of your employees when it's almost strangely a political issue?
Yeah, I mean, that's been the most disappointing phenomenon in this already unprecedented scenario is the sort of politicizing of very basic health and safety facts. You know, we have very few weapons against this virus. One of those weapons is wearing a face mask if you go outside or interact with people in indoor environments. And the fact that somehow that has become a statement of what side of the aisle you're on politically is shocking and very disappointing to see from our country. I mean, there's very few things where I get really energized about. Racial injustices is one. The sort of basic arguing of health facts in an environment where we as a collective have to work together to be able to go and solve this issue. And it's been, we've had a very clear leadership void in our country, and that means that companies have to step up and make these decisions on behalf of their employees, their customers, their communities, which is, I think, what we're all collectively doing. But frankly, it would certainly be way easier if you have the tailwind at your back of a government that was making sound decisions on behalf of the country on these issues.
So talking about stepping up, obviously, we're in the middle of a social crisis as well. There's, the Black Lives Matter movement. There's, just this week, it's well, how do immigrants feel about some of the decisions the president is making? Do you believe that companies don't have a choice now in taking a stand on these issues? And how do you take that stand without alienating your customers when you're global companies? Todd?
Yeah, the way we think about that is there are a lot of issues that you could argue either side politically, but then there are some fundamental issues that are in the best interest of every employee at Okta, every future employee at Okta, and all of our customers. And these are things like the health and safety of our employees. I mean, we're not going to be political about masks. Our employees should wear a mask when they go out. That's just all the evidence points to that, and that's the prudent thing to do. Racial injustice is bad for everyone. It's not a political issue. It's just a human rights issue, and it's something that's very clear that we need to stand up vehemently for as a business and as an organization, as a set of people in this society. And the political issues that are beyond that you could debate about, maybe we'll have that debate, but those issues are fundamental to us and not debatable.
So how do you think when we do return to some sort of new normal, how will life be different? How will office life be different? For example, are you going to be getting on the road and talking to customers in person day after day after day? Stewart?
A great question. And we'll see, because a lot of it is about the cultural expectations, and we all evolve kind of in concert. But one thing for sure is this is a generational shift. And I'm going to put this in terms of technology, although I think it's broader than that. It's like in the 70s, the first wave of digitization in like financial services, or the 90s, the adoption of PCs, 2000s, the spread of the internet, the early generation of cloud services. Because there is going to be a much bigger reliance on technology, and in kind of back and forth with that, a little bit of yin yang, there'll be a change in how we manage. I think there's an opportunity now, never waste a crisis, to reimagine how we report on businesses, how we plan, how we manage people, and it behooves all of us to really to seize that opportunity and see how much, as a result of all this, we can level up.
So how is this changing the way you think about your business, how you plan for the short and long term? Aaron?
Yeah, I think I think we all represent effectively digital first organizations that have tried to run our businesses in a very agile, fluid, dynamic way. I think what we're seeing is that the world economy now has to catch up to that way of running an organization. And so when you think about what is a digital first business, doesn't mean it's a remote first. It doesn't mean it's office first. It's digital first. It means that people can collaborate in real time. You can work from anywhere. The business is much more fluid. And so when you think about, how do you plan for an organization in the 21st century when you have pandemics, when you have disruptions to your supply chain, you have to build an organization that can be resilient to whatever gets thrown at you. And I think that is what more and more businesses are experiencing. And the best way to do that is first of all, make sure that you have a culture and a set of principles that let you get through these types of events. And make sure that you have a way of running your business from a technology architecture standpoint that let you be resilient as well. And so whether it's the short-term pivots that companies have to make right now to enable a remote workforce, or the long-term transformation that companies have to go and drive to be digital first, I think you're going to see a completely new operating model that companies begin to incorporate going forward.
Now, given all of the uncertainty ahead and all of your employees working remotely, how do you get them all aligned, in one direction going forward? And, what's a sort of healthy dose of paranoia for a CEO to have at a time like this?
Full cup of paranoia, I would say. And I think we're still figuring out the best ways to generate that alignment. Obviously, some of them are the same. People have meetings and they they make presentations and write documents. But I think because we're missing a bunch of tools that we had when most people were in the office, we're still discovering ways to compensate for that.
A full cup of paranoia, Todd?
Yeah, I think for us, it's the couple of things that are important. One is just kind of delegate to the employees what's best for them in this time of crisis. So we want to give flexibility. So an employee that's got 2 kids at home under the age of 5, they can take care of them. While at the same time, making it very clear at a high level what the company is trying to do and keep everyone motivated by this big opportunity we have, which is all this technology takes over the world. We have to be there to help the world adopt it. So we're trying to do that over at a high level as well.
But then, Aaron, do you have to redefine productivity? What productivity means?
Yeah, I think in this world of, you have to be very thoughtful about things like health and the safety of employees, which is causing us to move to this remote work way of working. At the same time, we should be optimistic around the future and how we can execute and where we need to go as a business. And so the middle ground is, how do you keep a company focused on that long-term vision? How do you keep it running effectively? How do you make sure that the business remains productive? And I think you have to start to shift from thinking about the productivity of any individual, because right now there's too many distractions. There's too much disruption going on for any one individual's life. You have the economic crisis, you have family member issues, you have health, you have social issues. And so you have to think about, as a business, how do we organize the business to be productive and to be effective in this environment? And innovating, serving customers, shipping new updates to your products and services, And so I think we have to have a redefinition of what productivity looks like. It's not about the individual, but the collective. And we're in an environment right now that depends more on the collective than ever before.
Meantime, one last question. You are all in businesses that are benefiting from this pandemic and this shift to remote work. Your customers might not be in that position. How do you balance that with customers that might be struggling, whether it's, customers in the travel industry or elsewhere who've seen their business come to a complete standstill? Stewart?
I think there's a little bit of solidarity. So we and I know that Okta and Box are doing the same, working with a lot of those customers to try to figure out how to support them, because it's not good for anyone to, when businesses go bankrupt. I think for those companies that are more challenged by the current economic environment, it's even more important, and this might sound self-serving because we're all selling software, but it's even more important that they find the efficiencies. They find ways to become more effective and more productive, whether that means more aligned, whether that means better communication, whether that means better tools. But a lot of businesses, I think, just won't survive unless they make those fundamental improvements.
All right.